we finally got a dev diary for EU5 about Byzantium, or someone can call it also Eastern Roman Empire, because actually naming of Byzantium will be one of the game options when you're starting your campaign. See, this is purely a political map mode, and this is a terrain map mode with political map modes combined. Doesn't that look quite nice? So Byzantium in 1337 obviously is in shreds, right, compared to its old glory. It's in a very decadent period. The predecessor of the starting ruler, so the Andrikonos II, Palaiologos, he dissolved a lot of key institutions, including navy, trying to save the bankrupting economy, and the VIM system was just getting worse and worse. The starting ruler of Byzantium in EU5, so his son Andronikos III, is facing a lot of difficult tasks, because bankrupting economy is not his worst problem. There's also rising Ottomans to the east, trying to take over Anatolian lands and cross the strait to get to European mainland. The north, they are having issues with Bulgarians and Serbians. So that's how the starting ruler looks like. Not bad stats, he's pretty good at diplomacy. 1.3 million population, which is I think similar to what Poland starts with. Orthodox, obviously, mostly Greek, not really Roman, and obviously also mostly Orthodox. They start with 81 locations, 28 of base stacks, 12,000 army. That's pretty big, because that's one of the biggest that I've seen, and 37 ships. As we've learned already, the biggest and most important nations who have their own naming for the state. So having, besides the crown, we've got Tnatoi for nobility, Kleros for clergy, Astoi for burghers, and Agrikoi for commoners. Look that they keep adding also small and nice elements that you guys keep asking for. You see these elements to the UI that are added to these states. It's really changing based on the people's feedback. Autocracy, one of the government reforms, this is a default one, it's not really unique, but they also start with the VIM system that is increasing nobles' power, but allows you a building that gives you manpower, which is very rare in 1337. In that age of transitions, there's only one default building that gives manpower. So this is of big use for standing army, which is much stronger than the peasants. And I assume that's gonna be the biggest weapon Byzantium can use to actually survive. Also very strong guarantee form is additional cabinet seats. As you know, in that game, a lot of stuff is handled by the cabinets, like increasing stability faster, increasing control of a province, migrating people faster, integrating a province, changing culture, changing religion. Additional cabinet seat is of huge help. Since they are head of the patriarchy, it is located in their province of Constantinople, they're having state patriarchy policy that is giving them monthly religious influence. They do have a pronoia system that we know from EU4, but here it really does seem to be much simpler. It is just maximum tax decrease as well as infantry maintenance costs. This is kind of disappointing compared to how good the pronoia system is in EU4. The Byzantine law policy is giving additional guarantee forms. Most of the nations start, I think, with 2 starting guarantee forms. They start with 3 that we already seen. Even though they lost a lot of pieces of art in the 4th Crusade, they still do start with a lot of them, like Venetians couldn't move Theodosian walls, so they are still there, and multiple others more and less known, like for example Hagia Sophia, are still here. And the works of art that were created just before the start date, they do have an actual creator that I don't think I've seen a creator in a screenshot yet. There was always a unknown creator. Here we actually do have names and type of an artist. So this guy is probably some kind of legal guy, and this guy is a writer. So Theodosian wars are not only a piece of art, this is actually also a building, looking really nicely and giving a lot of defensive bonuses to Constantinople location. How about their national ideas? So advances. Heart of Orthodoxy gives them tolerance to the true faith. Late Cataphracts is a unique regiment for cavalry that they have in Age of Traditions, and they also do have a unique infantry regiment, Akritai, in the starting age. You know, so these two, combined with the fact that they do have manpower in 1337, again, is the biggest strength, I assume, to survive. In Age of Renaissance, they are getting extensive conscription, that is giving them additional manpower and reduced army reinforcements cost. And I'm wondering if this is army reinforcements cost as cost in money or cost in manpower, because that's the first time in seeing this modifier. They do have also a Varangian Guard, which is unlocking them Varangian units. They can have 4 of them with additional stats. I'm honestly... This is probably great for experienced players, but an inexperienced player, and that's all of us, it's really hard to read it. I do think that easy approach combined to this would be comparing the special unit type to default stats of a default, in this case, infantry. Because, oh yes, great, they have 1.0 combat power, but what's the default at this point of game? The City Taker is their own artillery regiment, which is, I think, unlocked a bit earlier than for the other countries in Europe. But yeah, how about the narrative? Byzantium will face very early on a civil war, which historically started in 1341. Here it might happen dynamically, but it will happen. I played few hours as a test as Byzantium, and it did happen to me. They're also giving some background that the civil war was the moment where Serbians count themselves as an empire, and that's why it starts as an empire in EU4. Bulgarians took over some lands, and Ottomans gained foothold in Europe. But let's start with some privileges. They first of all start with disaster privileges, where each of these states loses their satisfaction. They pay much less taxes and give you additional negative modifier. Nobility, with all of this, I mean morale and minus 20 tax. Burghers, minus 25% tax, and they also have less trade capacity. Clergy, monthly religious influence, and commoners is just lower satisfaction and tax. All of the big features in EU5 are situations, like for example, Black Death is a situation, or the Red Turban Rebellion, I believe, is also a situation. The Turkish threat, so the strongest beylik in Anatolia, usually the Ottomans, will be having also that situation. I think it's a situation for all of the beyliks, where it is actually speeding up the unification of Anatolia to make it a bit historical. So that's also an answer for people saying, how do you make some of the fast expansions historical that happened in real life? This kind of stuff, like situations for the Turkish threat, is how they handle that. I think they also have what's called legendary conquerors for some historical conquest that happens, that might happen in actual E5 as well. In certain situations there can be also a disaster, a succession crisis, which is the bid for the Byzantine crown. I also did get it when I was testing Byzantium. That is really hurting, is decreasing your crown power even further, is state satisfaction equilibrium, and rebels are going fast. They call it a semi-generic disaster because it's not the generic disaster that you have a succession crisis, but some countries are having more flavor to it, including Byzantium. Then there's plenty of dynamic historical events. I don't remember exactly now, but when I was checking around the map, I think they had like bit similar amount of the events to Poland that has like 70. So it's not as huge as like the Ottomans or Russia that have 100, 200, but it's still a big and decent amount of the content, which is, I think, good, because Byzantium disappeared 100 years into gameplay of EU5, so it shouldn't have more content than like Ottomans, Russia or Poland. It has similar to Poland, but also we do want these events as a player base, right? We want to just have the content for Byzantium. That's why there's plenty of it, including a lot of stuff around the artists. But what I like the most is an event about Gemistos Plenton. And that's a guy that you can let him stay in the card, and he he might try to revive Hellenism. So you might have a Hellenic Roman Empire in EU5. And they also mentioned there are some alt historical events that they make purposely for the Byzabus, to be honest. Let's check if there are any interesting pieces of content in the comment section from the developers. Associated values, and these are different colors than I've seen in my game. And this look like an improvement and cleaner to see. Let's compare it to my game. Look, this is my recording. It's so easy to find this kind of differences when you play the game for 50 hours. This is my game, and this is a state of a game after a few weeks. Again, my game, current dev diary. It is a good improvement, and I do like to see it. Is there any content for the conquest of Anatolia or other areas of the empire? I was particularly wondering if there is anything to guide the realization of Western and Central Anatolia. There are a couple of events regarding that, yes. Are there any events for Thessaloniki breaking away under the control of the Zealots? Could be fun to play. Absolutely. And is it they're adding slowly these little nice elements and backgrounds for you? Like, guys, this is your feedback on UI. It should be more like additions to the UI from that era, and this is happening. Byzantium now faces a decadent period that began almost 3 centuries ago. And what happened in 1204? What happened in 1204, Paria? And somebody just responded with that picture. Is there any content about revoking the Byzantine corruption in state privileges or destroying the Genoa and Venice special buildings in Constantinople that are hurting your trade? There's an event dealing with them in which you can decide to allow them to stay or expel them. Is it possible that the consolidated corruption in state privileges could be gained by any decaying empire, rather than being unique for Byzantines? Not a bad idea, we'll consider attaching to the decline of empire disaster. So this is really good, right? This is a really good mechanic. There wasn't such thing, like there were disasters in EU4, but not like for a decline of empire. There were obviously some specific, like for the Ottomans and their decadence, and adding this kind of hurting stuff is great. This is also really nice, showing a map of Greeks that are in Anatolia as well as Greece, and you see how many Greeks are still living in Anatolia. The guns of Orban, even that the Ottomans have in EU4, he can actually appear in EU5 as well. We have different colored UI depending on the country, because they changed the associative values, right? No, the purple color that you've seen in the associative values is for the different tabs and sub-tabs in the governed panel. Each panel now has a different color associated with it. Nice. It's not all brown anymore. There's also interesting piece of information is that you start with a core on a province if historically 50 years or less before the start date a specific territory was in hands of that nation. So Byzantium does not have cores for the Roman Empire, it just has very little. This is also a new UI for the buildings. You see they actually are having right now colors, and the extraterritorial buildings have flags. There's plenty of them in Byzantium, in Constantinople. Why I didn't enjoy the buildings UI in my 50 hours of gameplay. It was really hard to read by these little icons. I'm still not fully convinced. There's literally small icons, like 100 or so buildings. How do you read that? If the player manages to survive as Byzantium, an alt historical event related to the revenge for the Fourth Crusade. Yes! Why not Basileus instead of Emperor? There you go, already implemented. How does controlling the Dardanelles and Bosphorus work in terms of trade revenue? There are major trade choke points, and full control on both sides should mean high revenues from trade routes passing through. That was actually addressed last year in one of the first dev diaries, but they have a feature called Sandstone, where you're actually taking money for the trade flowing through your straits. Okay guys, this is all for today. We're out in the Byzabu country. There's plenty of more coming in. in the next Dev Diaries. I don't think I'm gonna cover all of them, but in case you want to see all of them, here's the schedule for next week. Monday, Steps. Tuesday, Golden Horde. I would like to cover it. Wednesday, Islam. Maybe I'll cover it. Friday, Ottomans. I will for sure cover it. Thanks for watching, guys, today. Let me know by liking this video if you do appreciate my feedback on these videos, and subscribe to the channel to get notified about the next videos.